The first thing that I always tell people is that preparation and the setup of the meeting is critical. And this is something that is a classic mistake that people make, is not doing adequate preparation, but even just doing a little bit of preparation goes a long way towards having a successful and productive meeting. If you have no prep, no structure, no agenda, what's going to happen? What's going to happen is probably the bossiest or most aggressive person or people in the group are going to kind of hijack the meeting. Everybody goes in with their own notion of what planning meeting means. You know, it's a 45-minute meeting that it just was placed on everybody's Google Calendar. They showed up, but they don't know exactly what the specifics are that we're supposed to talk about. So what ends up happening is the aggressive person starts, you know, kind of throwing their weight around, and people just kind of tune out. And after 45 minutes, there's not much that came out of that. So you can prevent all of that and avoid those kinds of challenges by just imposing some basic structures and rules and guidelines. An agenda is critical. And I'm going to come back to the theme of an agenda again and again because it's so critical, it makes such a difference. But it's also very simple to do. Only invite people that need to be in the meeting. Another common mistake that people make is anybody who even slightly touches the issue or touches the topic in question, they invite them because they say, hey, you know, why not get everybody involved in the meeting? But the problem is you're taking up people's time when it may not be necessary. And B, the more cooks in the kitchen, the more likely the meeting is to go off the rails and thereby become less productive. And again, this is especially true if it's not clear exactly what the purpose or what the desired outcome or the results of the meeting are or is. So only invite people that really need to be there. Anybody who just slightly touches the issue, you can update them afterwards, you can email them or whatever, but the meeting is really for those that can really contribute and collaborate in a significant and meaningful way, or people that really urgently need to hear everything that is being discussed among the group. Another thing in terms of preparation, you know, this is somewhat optional, but this is definitely relevant for many meetings, is to ask specific people in advance of the actual start of the meeting for specific contributions or specific information from their department or from their functional area. So for example, you know, you have someone from the marketing department, ask them specifically for customer feedback data. You have someone from sales, ask them specifically for sales figures from last quarter. Ask them to bring those data or bring that information. You have someone from an executive office, the executive assistant, ask that person for the strategic vision that has been outlined by that executive or by that C-level executive. Ask them to bring that word for word. What is that strategic vision? Instead of asking them in the course of the meeting, hey, by the way, what were the sales figures for last quarter? You know, they may not have that ready at hand, or so it might not be as productive. Or they may start wasting time digging through their files, say, oh, you know what, that's a good question. Sorry, let me just search for that, right? And they try to find it, but it might take time away from the meeting. If you just tell them in advance that you would like them to bring that data, then they're going to have it, and it's going to be much more productive as a result. So letting people know what you expect from them, having a clear structure and plan, and have an agenda. Now, with the agenda, you want to make sure you have specific items for the entirety of the meeting. Be realistic on time. I'm going to come back to time management in a second. But make sure you have specific items with timestamps, if possible. At least a general structure for the timestamps. So, you know, for example, we're going to spend the first 5 minutes of the meeting discussing the overall strategic vision. And then we're going to spend 10 minutes just in open discussion from each department on what your contribution is expected to be, something like that. Yeah, having a basic time structure enables people, first of all, it enables people to follow along more easily. It makes people feel that this meeting is structured and organized, and it's more professional, and it keeps things more disciplined. So you're less likely to get interruptions. And also, what it does is it depersonalizes the meeting from you. So a lot of times with meeting facilitators, what happens is we start losing control. People start saying things, people start hijacking the meeting. We're trying to regain control. That is much less likely to happen if we have a solid agenda that is well articulated and well thought out, and there's specific timestamps associated with that. Because at that point, it's not me as the facilitator that's trying to impose control, it's the agenda. So I am just here on behalf of the agenda. Now, between you and me, I'm the one who created the agenda, but that's not necessarily top of mind to people, right? People feel that they need to respect the agenda. So they're more likely to kind of behave, so to speak. And this is especially critical if you know that your group is going to be highly participative, or they're going to be very talkative, or people want to really get their voice heard. Especially important to have that strong agenda with a clear outline. So having a strong agenda, having a specific end goal for the meeting. Think about what is it that we're really trying to achieve here, and try to be as specific as possible. We're going to identify at least 5 potential vendors for this project, and then so-and-so will give us a timeline on developing an RFP, right? That's a solid outcome from a meeting. Another example would be, we will decide on 3 main items to ask leadership for support with in the upcoming quarter. 3 main items, not 4, not 1, right? It's not a vague concept, but 3 specific ones. That's a great way to focus things. And then once you have a specific outcome, repeat that multiple times throughout the meeting. It's one thing to announce the desired outcome over email in advance. It's another thing to announce it over email and then announce it again at the beginning, at the opening of the meeting, and that's even better. But it's another thing if you announce it multiple times and remind people multiple times throughout the meeting what we're really trying to achieve, what's the outcome that we're going for. That will really help to keep things focused and productive. So plan for the time and be realistic about time, okay? So I'll give you an example. Let's say you have 30 minutes on the calendar for this meeting from 2 p.m. to 2:30, okay? And you have 5 people that you want each of them to contribute roughly in equal measure during the course of those 30 minutes. Okay, so you got 30 minutes on the calendar, 5 people. So just do simple arithmetic. That means each person is going to speak for 6 minutes, right? Wrong. It's actually not going to be 6 minutes, because the first person is not going to speak the moment the meeting begins, from point 0, right at 2 o'clock, all the way through until the end at 2:29, right? Actually, realistically, you have to think, okay, I'm going to maybe have some interruptions. There might be 1 or 2 or 3 minutes of interruptions from technical problems, unexpected. Or, people are this person or that person is going to go off tangent, or is going to go off on a side topic, or there's going to be a side debate that's going to delay things. And this is especially relevant in a virtual context. You'll notice, for example, with Zoom meetings, when one person is speaking, everybody has to listen to that one person. At least in person, in the real world, 2 people might be having a side conversation while the larger meeting is ongoing simultaneously. But over Zoom, in order for any kind of order to be maintained, in order for anybody to be heard, one person can only be heard at a time. That's one of the structural challenges with virtual meetings. Another possible time delay is that there might be 1 or 2 key people that need to be in the meeting, and they're late. They're late by 1 or 2 or 3 minutes. And there's not really much of a point in starting the meeting without that person. You can get some housekeeping stuff done, but basically you're waiting for that person to arrive. So that's 2 or 3 minutes burned right there. Then you have to also budget time for your intro and overview, and for you to recap the agenda as the facilitator. That's 1 or 2 or 3 minutes right there. And hopefully you can keep it as concise as possible, but you do have to dedicate some time to that to keep things focused. And then probably 1 or 2 minutes at the end to wrap up, to conclude. Sometimes people have unexpected questions or queries that they want to bring up. For example, how much time do you want to plan for that? These are things that you have to really take into consideration as you're planning your time allocation. So if you have 5 individuals, and again, we're assuming that each of those 5 people definitely need to be there, and they definitely need to speak and contribute. At the end of the day, with all of these time adjustments, you might be looking at more like 20 minutes of actual substantive interaction. So instead of 6 minutes per person, now it's down to 4 minutes per person. And again, there might be other time issues that might come up. So Be very realistic about the time and plan the time accordingly, and give yourself plenty of time for buffer time, for unexpected developments and things like that. And you're going to be much more productive. So keep your eye on the clock as the meeting goes along. Like even as I do these webinars, for example, I'm always looking down at the clock to make sure that I have enough time to get to questions, to get to new contributions from people, or issues or other comments that people might bring up during the course of the session, as well as the content and the main material that I've prepared in advance. So, so to that point, if there's any questions on anything so far, leave a comment in the chat or leave a comment in the Q&A box, and I'll make sure to get to those before the end of the session. But being very realistic about time will save you a lot of headaches, and it will make your life much easier. And also, you know, in the worst case scenario, you end the meeting early, right? No one is ever going to complain that a meeting ended early. So you can't go wrong with that. So again, repeat the agenda at the beginning of the meeting. If you have a slide deck, it's great to have an agenda slide that really reinforces that agenda visually as well, in addition to the verbal component of what you're saying. Let's talk a little bit about your behavior. For one thing, I also want to talk about mindset in the course of the meeting, and then finally, audience participation. And then if you have any questions or specific issues that you want to cover, we'll discuss those. So in terms of behavior, and this is a big thing to think about when it comes to preventing interruptions. It's one thing to handle or manage an interruption when it happens or when it arises. It's another thing to prevent the interruption from occurring in the first place. So the way you carry yourself, you know, think about that. Think about, am I being assertive? Am I bringing a good amount of energy and momentum and power into the meeting? You don't want to offload your responsibility as a facilitator onto the group, right? If you're the facilitator, if you're the organizer of the meeting, then you have to own it, and you have to bring that energy and that leadership. And so you have to behave accordingly. That means speaking quickly and efficiently, getting to the point, not going off on tangents. You know, we talked about time management. That applies to you even more importantly than it applies to other people, right? How you manage yourself and your own verbiage. Are you spending too much time, say 2 or 3 or 4 minutes, to go over the agenda when you could just go over the agenda in like 30 seconds, for example, right? So bring the agenda, get your voice heard, keep your voice heard continuously throughout the meeting. So one common mistake is that new facilitators will kind of kick off the meeting. They'll say, hey, you know, here's the agenda. Okay, here's it. And so let me kick it over to so-and-so, right? And then from that point on, you don't really hear from the facilitator again for the rest of the meeting. That's a mistake. You want your voice and your presence to be felt throughout the course of the meeting, because people should feel that you're the leader and that you're in control. So there's always that presence in the background. Even if other people are speaking or contributing, you're always there ready to jump in very quickly, right? And that enables you to maintain control over the proceedings and the flow of things, to avoid these kinds of, to avoid interruptions, to minimize interruptions. So speaking up frequently, getting your voice heard. Joanne likes that point. Thank you for the vote of confidence. And keep things moving forward. You know, don't lose momentum, right? Don't get bogged down in specific things. You know, sometimes if you have a 30-minute meeting or a 45-minute meeting, which is really, that's really long, honestly, for a meeting. You shouldn't have a meeting that should go longer than about 30 minutes. But a lot of times what will happen, at least not without breaks. I mean, if you have like a 3-hour summit, let's say, that's fine, but there should be breaks in there. So that goes back to your agenda. But a lot of times what happens is you'll get off on side issues or debates or discussions, or people will be say, hey, you know what, that brings up a good point. I wanted to say this or that. Be very aware of that. Sometimes you can't resolve every debate or every issue, and you as the facilitator have to make that judgment call. as to like how much time do we have left, how much time, remember I'm keeping my eye on the clock, how much time have we spent so far in the meeting, how many other items do we have to get to, do we have an extra minute or two to debate this issue, or are we going to have to table that and then revisit that next time? Those are strategic challenges that you have to think about. So Joanne is asking, can you please share the link to the recording? I'd love to put these on our company's LMS, make it available to our members. Absolutely. When I get the recording resolved, I'm recording this now, and I'm gonna upload this in its entirety or maybe part of it to the YouTube channel for Cool Communicator. I'll make sure to share that with everybody for sure. And I'll share it on LinkedIn and social media, etc. So, so don't lose momentum. Don't get bogged down on one item unnecessarily, right? That is also an aspect of your power as a meeting facilitator, right? If the members of the group see you getting bogged down or getting distracted by stuff, then you're starting to lose power and credibility and authority as a facilitator. So keep that in mind. Again, this is behavioral, right? They're observing you and they're pinging off of you and they're noticing, okay, is this person in control? Or are they easily distracted or getting, getting pulled to the side on side tangents by various people in the meeting? So keep that in mind. Keep things moving forward. Now, in terms of mindset, I talked about ownership and leadership. Remind yourself of that. It's very important to have that sense of ownership of the meeting, ownership of the flow of things and the energy, and to bring that energy yourself into the meeting. So take responsibility in that sense. Don't outsource your responsibility to the crowd. Don't just say, okay, I clicked this button and I invited that person and I created a couple bullet points and I sent out an agenda and I'm good. So let's just, start the Zoom meeting and see what happens. No, you have to be actively engaged in managing the flow of the discussion from start to finish. Another aspect of the mindset is to maintain a positive attitude and a positive demeanor. A lot of times when things go sideways or things don't go as we were hoping or expected, people get flustered, which is understandable, but for you as the facilitator and as the leader of the situation, you don't want to get flustered. You don't want to start to take on negative energy. Even if individuals in the group have negative energy or they start saying, say passive aggressive comments, or they start being kind of cranky or acting kind of disruptive or whatever the case may be, or there's technical issues, which are always annoying and frustrating, but you got to roll through those moments and you got to keep that energy positive. Because again, the group is paying off of you as the facilitator, right? They're taking their cues in terms of their energy from your energy because you're the leader and you're kind of the person in the spotlight. So be very aware of how you're showing up, facial expressions, your hand gestures, your vocal tonality. What kind of word choice are you using? If there's a slight technical problem, do you say something like, oh my God, this is so frustrating. I'm sorry, guys. Sorry, I'm trying to figure this out. Or do you take it more as like, oh, looks like we have a technical problem, That's the deal with technology, guys. As you know, it's not always the easiest thing to deal with. So apologies, but we'll figure this out in a second. Something like that. There's many different ways to handle the same challenge or the same issue. It all goes back to your positive energy and your positive demeanor. And then be comfortable with crosstalk and interruptions. Expect it, especially if you have high status people or people that for whatever reason have big egos or are very powerful personalities or they like to hear their own voice. Expect a certain amount of crosstalk and interruptions and a little bit of jostling in that sense. Don't be thrown by it. Don't be fazed by it. Unfortunately, a lot of people are fazed by it. A lot of facilitators, they have their nice agenda set up. It's nice and structured, all planned out. And then there's something unexpected that happens. The person jumps in and says, hey, you know what? I think we should talk about this and that. I think we should change the agenda because there's a new development in my department and I think I'm really important and I think everybody should listen to me or whatever the case may be. So, we've all been there. Expect that, right? Accept that energy from the crowd. Don't be fazed by it. Don't be overwhelmed by it, right? Expect a little bit of craziness and a little bit of jostling in that sense. And so if you're comfortable with that, then you're going to be able to maneuver and finesse in those situations. Don't be a perfectionist. You know, you have your agenda and you have your structure and you have your rules or guidelines at least, but don't be a perfectionist. You know, it's not written in stone. You're dealing with human beings. You're dealing with other adults in your group. You know, it's not a classroom setting where you're the teacher and you can just punish people and send them into detention if they act up or something. It's not feasible. It's not realistic, right? You have to kind of manage those personalities. So I think having a positive attitude in the face of those issues makes a big difference, and being comfortable with that. Last point on audience participation, and then I'll definitely get to any other questions or comments that anybody has. You know, you might be expecting people to be highly participative or low participative. So get a sense, maybe you don't know, but over time you'll get a sense, knowing the people and the personalities in your company. Is this meeting likely going to have people that are very participative and very talkative, or is it going to be low participative or low participation? If it's people that are highly participative, again, big personalities, they're very talkative, etc., then that goes back to the agenda, that goes back to time management, that goes back to making sure your voice is heard and that you're carrying yourself with a good, strong, positive energy to be able to manage the momentum and keep things moving at a good pace so you don't get sidetracked. If you expect the people to not be very engaged, if you expect them to be quiet or shy, as the case may be, then you can call on people by name. You can specifically say, hey, haven't heard from you, Joe, in the last couple of minutes. What do you think? What's your opinion on this, right? And getting that audience interaction, that participation is really great for increasing the engagement and the energy in the group. So don't be afraid to call on people directly. And also don't be afraid to say specifically in the agenda, I want every person here today to provide 60 seconds on their opinion, what they think we should do next, right? So let's go around the room and each person gives 60 seconds, something like that. So that can be just part of the agenda or part of the structure, and you're getting people to be more participative, and therefore it becomes a more productive meeting, okay? So just to recap real quick, the preparation and the setup is crucial. Having a good agenda, identifying a specific end goal for the meeting and communicating that, planning for the time and being very realistic about time management, thinking about your behavior and how you're conducting yourself as a leader of the situation, having a great mindset, being comfortable with a little bit of jostling, a little bit of crosstalk, interruptions, and having a positive demeanor, good mindset, and then planning for audience participation. Okay, so those are the main themes that we talked about today as far as managing and facilitating the meetings. Thanks a lot, everybody. Take care. Bye-bye.